Good evening, Tony Dodson, alcoholic. It's good to be back here with you tonight. It's a little odd. This is the first time I've given a talk here to where Tom and Wallace, either one, were not here tonight. So those two chairs are for those gentlemen, because the first time I got invited to this group was by Tom, and second followed up by Wallace, and now Steve and Daniel are taking up their place and making sure I get a place behind the podium from time to time. So I'm honored to be here. It's a privilege to be asked to be done anything in Alcoholics Anonymous, but especially a group with roots as long and deep as this one is. This group has a special place in my heart, so I'm real grateful to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. You know, in any time we get up here to tell our stories, we're supposed to tell you in a general way what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And, you know, I can tell you that it's been a long time further away from a drink than it has been for me anyway. My sobriety date's June the 13th, 1987. And my home group is the Working with Others group. We meet in Angier at Angier Baptist Church every Monday night at 7 o'clock. And we have a rolling format. So on the very first Monday of each month, we study the tradition corresponding with the number that month. So this will be second tradition. The second Monday, we study the step corresponding, so step 2. And then the third, we have a big book study, a literature study. The fourth is an open speaker, like tonight. And then if we have a fifth, we usually discuss AA history or one of the stories out of the back of the book, which kind of parallels with AA history. And we have a little different format. We used to do the name call where we would call on people, and the group conscience just kind of took over one time, and a chairperson started letting each person go around the table and just either read a paragraph or pass or talk for just a few minutes. And I started noticing people who normally would sit there and not say a word, and you don't get to know them that way. They began to open up, and they began to share, and they didn't wreck the meeting. They didn't take it off course. We trust the chairperson to be able to guide, guide, not God. And overwhelmingly, it was receptive. And Vanessa's certainly come and visited us and been a part of that, and it gets our visitors involved. And it's just been something I've watched a group conscious, and it says in our literature in the service is that, there's nothing more powerful than a well-informed group conscience in Alcoholics Anonymous when it comes to service. And we're trusted servants, not senators. And I watched my little group change, and I've watched things happen. Some of them I don't really care for. Some of them it's okay. I'm just glad they let me stay around. But so what I was like, I was an ambitious, very enthusiastic, little redheaded guy that smaller than everybody else in my family, it seemed like, and huge imagination. And I couldn't, just like the book, I could not discern the truth from the false. So I told a lot of lies. So I appreciate when we read how it works that we're constitutionally incapable. It's not our fault. We seem to be born that way, so I'll ride that one. But I got in a lot of trouble growing up because I love telling stories. I love to entertain, and I would get those old folks in the neighborhood's attention. I'd be telling these fascinating stories. My mom said I just forgot to start it out as that. It's just a story. It's not the truth. And so they would go to somebody's house, and their house was supposedly burnt down, and it hadn't. And they'd be mad coming over like witch burners coming to our house, posse coming in to get the little guy that's lying there, everybody. They're taking clothes and stuff over to the house because I thought the house burnt down. And I just thought it was a fascinating story. I saw it on TV, so I thought I'd share it. And just stuff like that. I was just one of those kids that it says it takes a village to raise a child. I was definitely raised by the village I grew up in, because my grandmother could not handle me but for so long, and she would say, "Boy, go outside and play. Just don't leave the neighborhood." And that's a pretty good area not to leave, so I had a wide palette to work with. And I would go see all of her old friends, and most of the people in the neighborhood were aging at that point, and I would go visit them all. I just loved to go visit. And I guess I had that social thing from the very beginning. And when I got to school, some of that was curbed a little bit. I would get at the school bus, and I grew up down eastern North Carolina, so like most kids, you learn to take up for yourself pretty early on. You'd be fighting at the bus stop, get on the bus, get off the bus, you fight some more at school, and it seemed like maybe we were just testing ourselves or seeing who was going to stand up taller that day, but it seemed like that was a pastime for us. And so I got in a lot of trouble for that kind of stuff because I just wasn't going to take no crap off of them, even though I was smaller, and they loved to pick. So I kind of grew up like that, feeling like I was always off on the wrong foot. I could never seem to catch my balance. And so I would tell these stories to kind of make up for that, try to even things out. And that just tips you over. That doesn't work very well. So what happened for me is that I'm growing up and I'm a normal kid and I have cousins and I felt awkward and ill at ease most of the time when I was around kids that I wasn't comfortable with. Now, if I had my posse, I was always comfortable with my friends, and I tried to do like we do in AA. I'd circle the wagons and stay with the ones in my domain that I know I felt good around and I could survive in, and I could thrive in that environment. And I found myself often feeling like, feeling like that I was less than, and I hated that. I fought that. I just did not want to feel less than. I had a lot of pride and I wanted to be as good or at least good enough, And I remember the first time I took a drink of alcohol, I was 7 years of age, and I was at my uncle's house, who was an ex-Marine. He got out of honorable discharge. He was in the Korean conflict. He was an MP, Sergeant at Arms, and so he kind of looked like Sergeant Carter from Gomer Pyle. So he was my hero, because Gomer Pyle was a big thing in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up. And I love my Uncle Jim. I still do. He's down in Northport, Florida, and went through that horrible hurricane, tore up their whole place down there. But I loved him. He was the dad I never had kind of thing. And my cousin was Jimmy Dale, his son, and his nickname was Buckshot. So you can tell where I'm running with. I'm running with Buckshot and looks like, Sergeant at Arms in the Marine Corps. So I'm watching football on a Sunday afternoon. My cousin and I are fighting over who's going to get the bottle, the Pepsi bottle, who's going to have to drink out of that sissy glass. Neither one of us won the glass, both of us won the bottle. We have a fixation with bottles. I guess it goes from back to infancy. But neither one of us won the glass. So my uncle was really focused on watching this game, but he come in there with this pretty red, white, and blue can. He had salt on the top of it. And I'm watching him, and he takes a big pour, and he goes, I lost interest in the football, the popcorn, the Pepsi. I want to know what was in that can that looked like it was so refreshing, because he thoroughly enjoyed it. And I was like, man, I gotta have some of that. And so my cousin and I we're egging him on to let us just give us a sip, And he's like, no, your mom will kill me. No. And my aunt was distracted enough, and he looked around and he grabbed my cousin by the back of the neck, just kind of wet his lips with it, And I saw that and I said, I'm not going down like that. The minute that can even come close, I snatched it out of his hand and turned my back to him and got as much as I could and filled my jaws, looked like a hamster, packing up. And it started almost come out my nose, and I swallowed, and he wrestled it away from me, and it was crisp and clean and refreshing, and I burped really loud, and I loved everything about that Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. I've talked to a lot of people in AA that didn't have that experience when they drank Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. That's mine, and I'm sticking to it because I enjoyed it. I didn't drink alcoholically from that moment on, I can tell you that, but I drank enthusiastically from that moment on. I love the taste of beer. I mean, if you left one unattended, it was fair game. And that's just how my drinking. I never drank enough to get the effect produced by alcohol, of course. That came much later on. But I just was fascinated with it. I would watch my family get together, be a cookout, and everybody's tired. They're kind of run down, and my grandmother's cooking's good, but it wouldn't quite work the magic, And they'd start pulling out that cooler, and the beer'd start going, or that big old jug of ancient age whiskey that my grandmama drank would come out on the table, and the Yahtzee game would come out. And before I know it, we got a party. Everybody's relaxed. They're having a good time. They're talking loud. 2 hours later, she's running them all out of there because then they got out of hand, But that was just the excitement of it all. It didn't happen all the time, but when it did, it was special. I remembered it. It made an impact on me. And I just always had that connection with alcohol that it meant a good time, And I like to die to many a time chasing that good time. Not from suicide, but from just stupidity and drinking too much and not knowing when to stop. And then when I got older, I couldn't stop, What it looked like for me was I was a kid that got pretty good grades. I got into high school with no problem. Junior high school, I did pretty good. I played sports. I was pretty good at football and baseball. I enjoyed that. I was an average kid, and nothing out of the ordinary. My grandparents were really hard partiers, and my grandmother had quit drinking, and my grandfather had quit drinking. And so everything kind of calmed down as I got a little older around the household. My grandfather passed away. And I'm getting to where we're moving from the old neighborhood to a new neighborhood, so I've got that transition to deal with. My favorite uncle and his family moved out to Oklahoma to get a job at the Weyerhaeuser Mill out there because he's got a better opportunity to move up. You couldn't move up down there in Plymouth, so he took off and took the family. So now, man, my world's starting to come apart at the seams, and I'm going into middle school on top of that. So, boy, this is like, whoo, hang on. And when I got there, I remember as a teenager, I got there, some of it was good, some of it was bad, but it was just a huge transition for me. And what I found was, that when I would go camping with these boys on the weekend and stuff like that, the beer would start to come out. And what we'd do is I'd hit my dad's refrigerator and I'd get a couple cans of beer so he wouldn't miss them. They'd do the same thing, and cigarettes, and we just kind of pool our resources, and we go camp out down at the creek down there and hang out by the fire, drink beer, smoke cigarettes, and tell lies all night. And just doing what teenage boys do, live in the country. And we were having a really good time that night, and it's kind of, about next month, the herring will start to come upstream to spawn, and so we would set our nets and catch these river herring and cook them right on the creek bank. And these older men would come down, and they had big coolers with lots of beer. They had Falstaff, Country Club, stuff y'all might not have heard of, Schlitz, Malt Liquor Bull. They had old beer. It's new beer to them, but old beer now. But they would have coolers of this stuff. And we'd be frying those herring and cornbread and frying that herring roe. And those guys come there and eat all they wanted. And they let us drink all the beer we wanted. And I finally got to where I didn't have any parental domination. I had nobody controlling how much I was going to drink. And man, Katie barred the door. I took off drinking. Now, I didn't realize that me, all of about 80 pounds, can't drink with these 200-pound men. That math did never cross my mind. I drank like they did. You get another beer? Yeah, give me another beer, And probably about 2 hours later, you know what happened to me. I'm jumping in the fire, and I'm jumping in the creek. I'm picking fights. I'm doing all this crazy stuff. I go in the tent and pass out, and they're like, thank God that boy passed out, And I don't have any recollection because I've gone into a straight-out blackout, And I go in, I come up, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I think I wake up cold and wet, and I'm mad, and I'm fighting all the guys in the tent, and they're trying to calm me down. I think they have thrown me in the creek, and I'm like, oh, no, buddy. Now, you did that on your own. You picked a fight with a grown man. You jumped in the fire. You swam out to the no-wake buoy and rocked on it. Come back in, jumped in the tent. And we were glad you went in that tent and went to sleep. Because, boy, we either got to kill you, And I can't believe it. And then they start waking up. More of them would validate that story. And I'm like, oh, man, that just can't be true. And I can tell you that something like that, most normal people would have said, I'm done with that drinking stuff. I had enough of that. And I was like, man, I can't wait to do it again, And I chased that moment before I went into that blackout. That moment right there, the world came together. I was stronger, I was bigger, I was smarter, I was one of, hell, I was one above, And that's what I lived for right there. That one moment to where not only could I be good enough, but I was just a little bit better, And that's what I drank for. I drank for that moment when it worked, when alcohol worked for me, as the book talks about. But what happened for me was, just like men and women, we drink essentially because we like the effect produced by alcohol, as Dr. Silkworth puts it. But there's the other side of that's also injurious, and I can't differentiate the true from the false. And once I start to drink, I have little control over the amount I take. That's the part with me. And I would become that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I would go insane, and my friends would do crazy things, and I'd come up with black magic markers all over me, where you pass out at the wrong party. You come up painted. I was 16 years old, first time I got in trouble with the law, driving under the influence. And I had had my license all but about 30 days. And so my birthday's the end of January, so we're getting close to that night. But it was in the winter time for us still down east, and we had a nor'easter blowing in. We don't get a lot of snow in eastern North Carolina, but whenever a nor'easter blows in and the wind comes down from north just right, it's magic. We were getting those big flakes, and we were having a ball. And we had a carload of girls that were meeting us down at the river, and we were going to the grocery store, me and my buddies, and get some cigarettes and stuff, and we were going to go down to the river and build a bonfire and party. That's what we do. And my buddy goes in the grocery store as normal, and he's got this big old army jacket on. And he goes in there, and it's evidently got pockets like secret compartments inside, like Batman's belt or something. And he goes in there, and He comes out and he jumps in the back of my old 68 Ford Falcon, 3-speed on the column, y'all. This is not a getaway car. It's a good car, but it ain't a getaway car. 6-cylinder, 3-speed on the column, 3 on the tree, not going to get you away fast. So he's beating on the back seat, hey man, drive, like we're going to get away from a bank robbery or something. And so I'm pulling away, and he had stole wine. I mean, all the good wine. Mogan David 2020. Steve says I have to call it Mad Dog, so y'all know what it is. Richard's Wild Irish Rose, Thunderbird, Shake It Up. We had all the good screw cap wine. We had Marlboro Lights. We had Marlboro Reds. We had long ones, short ones, Cool Filter Kings, Cool Look Miles. We had everything. We were set. Party was on. And so we're drinking this wine and going down the road, and I'm smoking my Marlboro Red shorts with a flip-top box. That was how I rolled. And so we're going down the road, and we probably knocked down that Richards is gone. I think we might have started on the Mogan David. Somebody had a slits going around the car. We were chasing it with that, so that went real well, as you know. So I'm driving down the road, 30 days of experience driving here with a 3-speed on the column and the steering wheel. It's got about this much play in it before the wheels move. And the wipers, the old vacuum system, when you slow down, they speed up. When you speed up, they slow down. So every time I tried to go somewhere, the wipers would slow down, the snow would fill the windshield. I'd have to slow down, let them catch up, and then speed up again, And so the car's going up and back and forth. And we're coming down the road, and I'm changing gears, and I knocked my cigarette in the floorboard. And I can see it in them old cars. They had rubber. They didn't have carpet. They just had rubber like a truck, I can see it rolling around down there. And I'm just moving that steering wheel, and I'm timing it. And I'm going to go get my Marlboro. And I go down to get my Marlboro. And when I come up, I got headlights coming at me and the horns blowing. I move over this way. He goes down in the ditch, and the car erupts in laughter. I mean, snot flying laughter. These boys are just laughing hard. That car comes out of that ditch, cut that big old blue light on. I'm talking about the one that's on the top, not these strobe ones. It lit up the whole world like a black light, like a blue light. Just everything went blue, and I got so tore up, I pulled my car in the ditch on my side of the road. Just boom. And when you're in the ditch, the door don't open real good. Don't stay open. So what's happening now is this cop's walking up to the car, and I'm beginning to experience something that followed me through my drinking. It's a phenomenon that I'm going to describe. You may or may not have experienced it. My tongue began to swell. My throat began to close off. I began to sweat bullets. I mean, profuse big drops. I can't stop sweating. I can't hardly swallow. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I really need to get out of the car, but they do not like you to exit the vehicle. But I need to get out of this car because I got to go take care of business. And Mr. Mazelle's approaching the car because I'm a hometown boy, and he's walking up to the car, and I'd open the door and he'd close it. Open the door and he'd close it. Open the door and he'd close it. Finally, he took that flashlight and shined it in my face, and he could see the distress. He opened the door and stepped aside and let me go do what I need to do. But he got all my buddies out. And I'm over here, and I'm taking care of business, and I'm looking, and they're all over there, and they're all looking up at him. They'd look over at me and go. And then they look back up at him, and they look at me and go. Like, I'm just over here, and I'm just trying, man, can you just let me catch my breath, And he's like motioning for me to come over there, and I get cleaned up, and I'm trying to get straightened up, and I go over there, and I'm doing this now, and yes, sir, and yes, sir, and yes, sir, and he's telling me how much trouble I'm in, and I'm going, my dad's going to kill me. I'm dead. I'm never going to get my license back. I'm done. My car's gone. Life as I know it is over. And that's all I'm thinking running through my mind. And about that time, he reaches back and he grabs a buddy of mine. And he says, Mr. Dotson, tonight is your lucky night. This young man's the only one in the car who's not been drinking. And we all looked at him like, what is wrong with you, dude? Then he goes, if you're okay, we're going to let this young man drive you boys home. And I want to see this car on the road again tonight. I'm going to lock all of y'all up. Y'all okay with that? Oh, yeah, I'd have given him the car. Here, take the keys, Just don't let me. Oh, my dad would have kept it. Oh, no, I don't want to answer to that. Sure, he can take us home. Thank you, sir. And that was the only one I ever got out of. All the rest of them I got drunk driving tickets for. But you can see how that kind of started, It's just, man, I come out of the gate with problems. I didn't come out with the good story where you, looks like the beer commercials, All mine was problem drinking right from the beginning, it seemed like. But I'd have those moments of good times. And I lived for them good times, and I would take that chance. What my drinking did for me was it put me in a position to where I felt like I could succeed. And anything that would do that for me, and a guy like me that was feeling so awkward and out of place, I'd take that chance. And I managed to get out of high school by the skin of my teeth and some good guidance counselors, and I think they just really wanted me out of there. So I wasn't studious enough. I dropped out all the college prep classes about my freshman year. Sophomore year, I got my driver's license, so everything else went out the window after that. I dropped down to basics, just something I could go in and take a test and pass without having to do any studying, Just get through. That's all I wanted to do. But I've skipped school so much because as soon as the temperature got warm, a day like today, I can go ahead and tell you, I would have not been in school today. I'd have been out somewhere doing something else, fishing, hunting, swimming, something. I just was not interested in school, you know. The old sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that's really what I was focused on. And anything to do other than be in school. And if I got a chance to skip, I did. And I paid for it. Then I had to go to summer school. And that's kind of counterproductive, you know. So here's mine. This is a keen alcoholic mind right here. I'm in summer school, and the girls down the road from Columbia and Crestville, they don't have a summer school, so they're coming to our school to take the classes that they skipped too much or didn't smart enough to pass or whatever. But there's like 8 girls from that area coming down to our, and I've made friends with all of them. We're having a good time, and they pull up in this station wagon, and the girl's named Candy. If y'all are going to name your kids, do not name her Candy. This chick was wild. I loved her. God, she pulls up and she's in the back of this station wagon and she holds up a whole case of beer. She says, "We're going to Nag's Head. Would you like to go?" "Let me lock my car, honey. I'm going right on." "School, no sir. Let me lock this thing. I'm ready to go." And I piled right in the back. I jumped right through the back of the glass on that station wagon, right in there with her and that beer. That's a win-win situation. And off we go. We made it to Crestville. We're going in. We wore that case of beer out. Got to Crestville, we're going into red and white to get some more beer. And I'm watching these girls, they're coming down the aisles with beer up under the arms and holding them in their hands, and we're loading up, and they're coming down the aisles, and all of a sudden they froze. And they tossed that stuff into the shelves with the other goodies, they set it on the floor, and they ran. And I'm looking around like, what in the world would make them girls? They ain't scared of nothing. What are they running? And about that time, Jackie Gleaser from Smokey and the Bandit walked in the door. And he's walking down the aisle, looked just like him, come right down the aisle. And I just grabbed me a magazine like doing the movies, and I stood over here, and I'm watching him. And I'm watching them girls run around that grocery store, and I said, "Oh, I don't want no part of that." And they go outside, and he gets them all outside, and I'm thinking, well, I can walk back. I can probably thumb back. Well, here he comes back in the store again. He said, "Boy, get in the car." So I went back to get back in the station wagon, and he said, "Boy, my car." Another one of them good times gone bad right there. That just seemed the way my luck went. But you can't make that stuff up. I mean, it's just like, that's the kind of thing that happened to me. I going out to have a good time and it messed up anyway. But I got out of high school. I got to Greenville, North Carolina, which is where I wanted to go. My mom said, "Why don't you go to Washington, or Beaufort Community College, or Williamson, or Martin?" "No, I'm going to Greenville, take welding. I'm going to get back, build me a big house on the river, get a job at the mill. Life's going to be good, you know." She said, "Okay, but I really think you ought to stay home." "No, Mom, I got to go. I'm 18. I got to go. I'm like a spring out of the box, man. I got to go. I know what's going on. I've heard all my buddies that's going to ECU. I know what's going on in Greenville. There's a bar in every corner. There's like 8 girls to every guy. You can't go wrong. I got to go." Off I went. I lasted about a year and a half. I drank my way in and out of school. I drank my way in and out about everything I had. I had all my guns in the pawn shop. Mama had to come get me the guns and pay all my bills and get me all packed up and take me back because I had got my second consecutive drunk driving ticket, one right behind the other. Not long after I got out of the courtroom with the first one, I got the second one. That will prove without a shadow of a doubt that you cannot drink and drive in a small town with the only white Mustang Cobra 2 in town, and you ride around on Saturday night, they know it's you, Tony. There's no doubt in their mind. I wasn't smart enough to understand that. I could have thought they was picking on me. You know, it's quite obvious. Look, there he goes. Had to move back home and just ended up in all these different predicaments. I was in Greenville, and before I had to go back home, and we were having a great time one Saturday. We were keying up for a big football game, going to see the Pirates play football, and we'd started drinking these generic beer, and we pulled off our resources, and the A&P store used to sell these white cans that just had blue letters that said beer. Y'all may remember that. They were about $1.50 or something, a 6-pack, real cheap. So we went and got cases of it. We threw all the food out of the refrigerator and packed it full of beer and meticulously turned every one of them so it said beer, no matter how you looked in there, you know. And we took off drinking. And the last thing I know was I came to, and Willie Nelson was on the stereo. Somebody put on a Willie Nelson album. That's a vinyl thing you put on there and you play it. It's a record player. And I come to, and that's true, literally mean I came to, and the room was empty. And I'm drinking. I said, "Man, you might be alcoholic if you're drinking alone, boy. You need to get out of here, you know." There's always them things. Did y'all have those? You know, it's like you might be a drunk if, you know. Mine was always if you drank alone, if you drank in the morning. I'd already checked both of them boxes by now. So I was heading down the home stretch, and I said, well, I'm going to go downtown. And so I go downtown to Pantana Bob's to the little foosball hall down there. I'm playing foosball, and I'm winning, and I'm having a good time and talking smack and drinking. I done moved up from that cheap beer to those long neck glass Budweisers that are so good when they're really cold. And I was drinking them because they're free, because every time I win, I get a free beer. And I've been winning a while because I had a whole bunch of empties laying on that mantle next to me. It's like a bunch of old fireplaces in this thing. They have mantles, but their fireplaces were bricked up. It was a good place to set your beer bottles, so I had them all lined up behind me, and like trophies. And I drank enough and got loud enough that finally somebody beat me and got me off the table. And it's crowded in there, and I'm getting hot again. And here comes that swollen tongues, throat, sweat, the whole thing, that phenomenon would happen. I'm going to go outside and cool off. I'm just going to go outside and cool off for a minute. Next thing I know, I'm coming to, I'm laying there, and I can hear these sweet, tender voices talking. And they said, do you think he's alive? We might have to call an ambulance. I opened my eye. No, we don't need to call an ambulance. I looked down, I had no shirt on, I had no shoes on. Thank God I had pants on. I looked over here, and here's some of my possessions over here, and here's some of my stuff over here. And I'm looking at them, and they're just this cute little Christian couple. And the more they talked, the smaller I got, man. They said, we never come through these alleys. God told us to come through the alley tonight. And I'm like, oh, did you really have to say that? And I'm trying to get my stuff up, and I'm thanking them. She says, we just felt so sorry for you. Just let me get my stuff and get out of here, people, And I thanked them. Really. I said, I appreciate it. Let me get my stuff and let me go. So can we call you a cab? No, I got it. Can we drive you? No, I got it. Do you really think you need to be driving? I'm like, well, of course I need to be driving. I got to get my car home somehow. So I jumped in my car and drove home. Now, when you have that kind of experience, that night wasn't quite so bad, but boy, when I come to, the minute I became conscious that next morning, that was the first thing on my mind. I don't know about y'all, but I wake up to those kind of fears and those things and regrets. And boy, I had them, that hideous four horsemen, terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. It's the real drinkers will understand. I understood that morning exactly what they were talking about. And I drank real hard that Sunday to push that memory as far back in my mind, hoping it would never see the light of day. And it went on and on and on. And I finally went on back home for a while and lived with my parents and did a little odd and end jobs. And then I finally got my license back, and I got a job with an electrical contractor and worked about a year with him. I had re-met a girl I had in high school. We didn't care for each other in high school, but she grew up and blossomed. And I cared a lot about her then. And we started dating. And she was ready to get out of that town, and I was already moving toward Raleigh with this company I'd been working for about a year after that. And they told me, they had more work in Raleigh, and this was in about 1984. And there wasn't any work. The economy was drying up, and I said, sure, I'd love to come to Raleigh. I've never been to Raleigh much anyway, just a state fair. That's about it. So they said, we got a job waiting for you. You just get there, and we'll take care of you. So I did. I packed everything, that little 76 Mustang Cobra 2, and off to Raleigh I went. I took Tony and all of his alcoholism right along with him. And what that looked like was I hit every topless bar every weekend. I didn't go back home to that girlfriend. I would make up lies about drinking and different things and all that. And finally, it all came to a head one night when I had two roommates. And one of them was on board with the story, and one of them won't. And when he come home late, he answered the phone. And Janice said, hey, tell Tony when he gets back from Greensboro working this weekend to give me a call. Working? No, him and Jeff, they went down to the bar. He'll be back in a little bit. Please tell him to call me. I had a note on there. Call Janice. I said, what'd you tell her? She said, I told you it was the bars. The one guy that's got to be honest. You know what I mean? It's like, so you get on the phone. We do that whisper thing when we're making up, when we just, tell him anything just to get back in good graces. And we're talking and we're making a deal. I'm working out the best deal I can, putting on my lawyer's shoes. I'm pleading my case. And she says, I love you. She says, I don't remind you drinking. She says, just you lying about you drinking. It just bothers me something terrible. Light bulb. Oh, so I just need to do something about my lying. She said, yeah, that would be great. If you could just stop lying about where you're going and what you're doing and tell me the truth, I'll be all right. We can do that. So I got to work the next day, and I'm talking to my buddies at work about what I need to do. So Larry, Mo, and Curly, we all got together there and came up with this brainstorm. And they said, man, you go to Wake County Mental Health Center and you can talk to someone there and they can help you not lie. I'm sure they can help you. They've helped me with a lot of problems. I'm working with some good guys. And they got experience with this stuff. They said, yeah, it don't cost much because you don't make much. And they said, it's just based on what you make. You can do that. Well, the Alcohol Treatment Center of Wake County is right here. And Wake County Mental Health is right there. I was almost where I needed to be. I need to be next door, but I was taking the short route. I was going here first and then over there. So I walked in there, and I think it's going to be something like Jack Nicholson, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I filled out all the paperwork. And then they give me this questionnaire, and it looks a lot like our pamphlet. Now, you're asking a guy who wants to stop lying to answer questions about his drinking. What do you think he's going to do? It's a check yes and check no. Now, I'm writing in the margin. I'm flipping that thing over. I'm looking for real estate because I have to explain why I check yes, right? I got to explain why I check yes. Why do you drink every day? Well, I'm thirsty every day after work. I got to, all this. And have you used controlled substances? Which ones? I got to write that thing out, and has your drinking caused you a problem at home? Has your drinking caused you a problem at work? Has your drinking caused you a problem at school? Yes, but let me explain. And she gets down there, and finally, this is only supposed to take like 3 or 4 minutes, right? 10 minutes later, I'm over here flipping this thing. She's like, stop. Come with me. That's not a promotion, by the way. She takes me to see the psychiatrist. I'm so bad off, the psychologist don't even want to deal with me. She's just going to ship me off to the psychiatrist, to the big doc. So I go in there, and I think it's a promotion. I think it's a big thing, right? It's not a good thing when they do that, by the way. So I go in there, and the psychiatrist is reading over all my paperwork. And the little girl, she's in there whispering in her ear, which I thought was rude. Talk loud enough so I can hear you. That's rude. My mom told me not to whisper like that. And I'm trying to listen, and I picked up a word or two, but the lady would look and go, and then she'd smile, and she'd go, and she'd smile again. And finally the girl left, and she's going over the paperwork, and she says, Mr. Dawson, she said, I see here that you drink a couple of beers every day after work. I said, yes, ma'am. Now, for y'all, I don't know how your couple went. My couple went, I stopped at the first store. I got 2 tall Budweisers. Then I got 2 more, and 2 more, and 2 more. It was a couple, but it was like 8 or 10 couples. But it was a couple if you asked me. I had a couple beers. That was always my favorite answer. So she knew that. So she got me to define a couple. So I had to have it. She called me out on it. And so as we went down that list, she said, I see you controlled substances. How often? Oh, just parties, special occasions, So you're not a daily user. And I'm thinking, okay, I smoke pot every day till I can get off work and drink beer. Yeah, maybe some of it, I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to learn how to do this thing. Lady, you're asking me some tough questions. So we go through this thing, and long story short, the only thing that I did not lie about was I never drank while pregnant. That's the only thing on there that I did not lie about. And she's so impressed with this that she's starting to fill out this thing. And I thought, man, I'm going to her private practice. I don't have to come in this mental health no more. These folks ain't watching me walk in and out. I have got it made. I've hit the jackpot, boy. And what she was writing was Alcoholics Anonymous and a telephone number. Drug Action in Wake County, a telephone number. And she turned it around and she showed it to me. She handed it to me. I thought I was going to her office. She was sending me to somewhere else. And she takes her glasses off and she smiles real pretty. And she said, Mr. Dawson, you call those numbers. And after you've been sober for 1 year, you come back and see me, and I'll see if I can't help you with that dishonesty problem you got. I was so mad, well, like a bottle rocket. I got a shot through the roof. I come in here to stop lying. You want me to quit drinking too? Everybody wants me to quit drinking. Why don't y'all leave my drinking alone, But the only way you're going to stop lying is to stop drinking. No, I didn't want a part of that. I thought she was crazy. I stand here today. It was crazy. She was spot on. I'd love to say that was the end of it, but that ain't it. What it ended up for me was multiple car wrecks, just total lost. I come out of them without a scratch by God's grace and God's grace alone. He was with me in that alley. He was with me the night I went out at that same apartment in Raleigh, and I was drinking all day, and we were having a big time. And started out that morning drinking George Dickel and a White Label, and I think we're on our second fifth. And my roommates went to North Carolina State University, and I'm a construction worker. But they had a friend of theirs from Charlotte. She was a cheerleader at NC State, cute little girl named Kathy. She called and she was sobbing. Just sobbing. God bless, she couldn't hardly catch her breath. She was crying so hard. And I felt so sorry for her. And she said, Tony broke up with me. It's another Tony. And she was just brokenhearted. And I said, well, honey, just hold on. Me and George will be over there and we'll fix that broken heart. I'll be right there. Well, I can tell you, I never made it. I started on my way over there and I ran into this big party in our apartment complex, spilled out between 4 apartments, took up the whole breezeway. And I thought, I've been drinking all day. I might need to get a little fortification there to help me get through the night, So I went in there looking at some fortification, and evidently I found it, but I didn't know it. Next thing I know, I'm cold. I'm coming to. I don't know where I'm at. It's a very bright room. I'm starting to open my eyes, and I think I'm in like purgatory or something. It's so bright, white light, like I have died. And then the nurse walks in, and she says, oh, you're back with us. And I'm like, well, where'd I go? And she's like, you've been here quite a while. I said, why is my throat hurting so bad? She said, well, we had to intubate you. We had to pump your stomach out. Your alcohol content, your blood alcohol was toxic. She said, we couldn't get you to come back to consciousness. We've been flushing fluids. We pumped your stomach out. We've got a lot of IVs and stuff hanging on me. I'm butt naked with just a little sheet over me. That's why I'm about to freeze. There's a chair with my clothes that are wet. Now, how did I get wet this far away from water? Like, man, I get drunk, get wet in a hurry, Oh, how did all this happen? And she said, well, so this is hearsay. This is what the ambulance driver told her. The ambulance driver told her that they found me in a storm drain and the water was going down. My coat was in it, so I wasn't being able to come up. So the water was going down, filling up, I'm going down. They come out there, I guess they thought I had drowned. I don't know, because I was completely passed out. I went outside to cool off, and next thing I know, I'm coming to the hospital. And so they had this, they didn't know if I had, drowned or if I was just drunk, passed out. But as soon as they got me in that ambulance, I'm sure it could smell that it was a lot of George Dickel going on there. So obviously this boy's drunk. He's not drowned, he's drunk. And another time that God just steps in and takes care of this poor old drunk. And what it finally took for me was, it took, that little girlfriend and I ended up getting married, and it took several times of absolute misery, absolute trouble, hitting the bottom and still trying to go lower. And finally, I caught a charge of felon possession with intent to distribute. They did not like my materials management and distribution practices I had going on. And they took our car. They froze our money. I didn't know if we were going to lose our home or not. And that poor girl had to deal with not having a car. She had to deal with a lot of stuff, the inconveniences and things that I put her through. But I managed to get a good lawyer, and we got clear of that, got out of that, thank God. And 2 weeks later, I'm riding around with a bunch of this stuff in my pocket, drinking wine coolers with her, having a good time on a Sunday afternoon. I never gave any thought what might happen to her if we'd have got stopped. And that's just what it is. I just thought that I was overreacting in that situation. Well, the next day, she found all that stuff in the house, and she was it. That was it. She'd had enough. She got the suitcase out, she's throwing clothes in, and I'm taking them out. She's putting them in, I'm taking them out. She's putting them in, I'm taking them out. Finally, she said, stop. And I said, look, I'm tired. I said, I'm just tired of it all. I'm tired of the trouble. I'm tired of the living. I'm tired of drinking to live and living to drink. I'm just tired of it all. I just want help. I just need help, and I want help. And I mean it this time. I just really want help. It's kind of like Bill Wilson when he was talking to Lois and he was still in her forebodings, I finally I gave up, and she said, you got one more shot. And I started going back to meetings, and I was so confused I didn't know where I wanted to go. I went to Surrender to Win group of Narcotics Anonymous. Thank God for that little group on Highway 50 in Garner, North Carolina. I walked in there on a Saturday night. I was having trouble staying sober, and I drank on a Wednesday. And I went to a meeting Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, didn't pick up a white chip. I went Saturday night, and I knew if I left without surrendering that I probably would not make it back. And so I swallowed my pride, and I picked up a white chip that Saturday night, and I met my first sponsor. And he came up to me after the meeting, and he didn't circle a pamphlet. He talked with me. He didn't talk at me. He didn't talk to me. He talked with me. Nobody ever talked with me. Everybody talked down to me. Nobody talked with me. The good women in my mother's church, they prayed over me. They dunked me. They did everything they could to help this old boy stop drinking. And it didn't work. And this was the first man I felt like Dr. Bob did when Bill Wilson was explaining to him about what alcoholism is and how it affected him. And when Henry started to talk to me about his drinking and the young unmanageability in his life, and yet he was 3 years sober at that time. And he took me the next morning to a spiritual meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. He would take me to meetings all week long. He did not give me a chance. I didn't need to drive. We didn't have but one car. We managed to get it back, thank God. And he just come and got me. And he took me to meetings, and he got me introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. Took me to his home group, and I joined his home group, the Crabtree group in Raleigh, North Carolina. Was my first home group. And I was the youngest person in there by far, by probably 12 or 15 years. I was 25 years old when I got sober. But those good people in that group loved me in spite of myself. See, the way that I lived, I had to dress a certain way. I had hair a certain way. I had this big, puffy red hair and a hat. I looked like Redbeard the Pirate. I had a full red beard. Most people would slide over. If I sat down and you sat down, you'd slide over. I just didn't look like, I looked like I had to look to get the stuff I needed to get at the places I had to go to get it without getting killed. So that's kind of where that was. I didn't look like I normally do. And they loved me anyway. They didn't care. They didn't move their pocketbooks. Like most people, I'd sit down, they'd move their pocketbook. She didn't move her pocketbook. They offered me a cigarette after the meeting. They talked to me. They loved on me. They wanted to know if I wanted cookies and coffee, and I didn't want neither. I just didn't want to drink. I didn't want to go crazy. I didn't want to blow my brains out. That's what I didn't want to do. And they talked to me about love and service. They showed me what AA love and service was, and they integrated me into that group. We got there an hour before the meeting, and we made coffee and set up. And we stayed an hour more after the meeting and cleaned up. And I met this wonderful woman, Marie Rich, who was one of the older members of that group. And she thought enough of me one night. I was a 8 o'clock guy, 9 o'clock guy. I would run out the door right at the end of the meeting. And she caught me in the hallway, and I drug her about halfway down the hallway before we got stopped. And she said, "What are you so mad about?" And through gritted teeth, I'm just, nobody doing, they're just not doing right at work. My wife ain't doing right. Ain't nobody doing nothing right. Restless, irritable, discontent. And she knew it. She's smart. She said, "Well, come on, let's go outside and smoke a cigarette. Tell me about it." And I got out there and I let all them resentments start to come out, and she just let me get it all out. She said, "Sugar, Wednesday night, we're going to have a step study. It's not a meeting of AA. It's just your sponsor comes, your sponsor comes, and me and a group of the ladies I sponsor. And there's a whole bunch of us in this group that have a dedicated book study. And that's all we're doing is we're studying the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think it would benefit you greatly. Why don't you join us?" I'm in. That was the smartest decision I ever made, because I got to hear how those old timers worked step 1, 2, and 3. I got to understand what it meant. About 3 months into this thing, I experienced something I'd never experienced before. I left work restless, irritable, discontent. Everything in me wanted to drink a liquor. I went to great pains to protect that. I talked myself in and out of going out and getting me some liquor. I talked everything I could. The hole in my chest the wind was blowing through was so great I almost was consumed by it. And all I had was this little saying used to be in AA back in the 80s, was the time to call your sponsors before you drink, not after. And I went to the phone and I picked up that phone and I called him. I knew he wasn't going to be there because he was young. He's never home, not that time of day. He's either on the way to a meeting or on to get me to go to a meeting. And he picks up on the first ring and I'm like, dude, and I tell him where I'm at. I said, "Man, everything in me wants to drink. I mean, everything in me. I can smell bourbon. I can taste bourbon. I need to drink the liquor bad. I need to talk to you." He said, "Can you come to the house without stopping to get any alcohol?" I said, "I think so." He said, "Come on." I got over to his house, and we went back through all the near-death experiences and misadventures of my drinking, and he did something nobody ever done, is he helped me to fully concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. Without a doubt, I could no longer drink safely anymore, ever again. And then he said, "Well, Tony, where do you stand with God?" And I dropped my head and I said, "I believe in God. I just don't think he believes in me much anymore." And he dropped his head and he said, "Boy, I just don't understand how we went through everything we went through, and God showed up every time you needed him to pull you from harm's way." He said, "I think God does care about you. Maybe you need to change your point of view." And I said, "Okay." And he grabbed my hand and I jerked my hand back. I said, "I don't hold men's hands, I shake it, look in the eye firm. And he says, "You told me that you were willing to go to any length to stay sober. Did you mean it or not?" I said, "I did." He said, "We're going to pray, Tony. Calm down." "Okay, we're going to pray." And we got down and we prayed. I don't really know what. I know today it was a third step prayer. Then I just was saying words because y'all got to realize everything in me still wanted to drink. That ain't going away. I'm still wanting to drink. I'm praying and still wanting to drink. And he says, go home and get you some rest and we'll talk tomorrow. I left his house and I'm driving home and I'm still just crazy, man. Just insane stuff going on. Everything's turmoil. I'm thinking about drinking, thinking about how I can get it and all that. And about that time, everything just went dead silent. My brain just stopped. My body calmed down. My emotions calmed down. And everything was just quiet for a few seconds. And then it just started kind of coming back in. And the thought came to mind, I'll never have to drink again unless I choose to. Never. And that obsession and compulsion was removed that day, and it's never come back since that day. At the end of the third step in the big book, it says that once we make that decision, voicing it without reservation, that sometimes in effect, a great one was felt at once. That was my experience with the third step. That great effect was felt at once. I immediately wrote a fourth step and did a fifth step. And I worked through 6 through 12. And I began to take my place in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was a little over 6 months sober, you know. Early on, you need to catch me early, man. I never made it if you let me go a year or whatever else other people do. I'm glad my sponsor got me right into it. What that looked like for me today is I've been sober a right good while, and I've had sponsors that passed away. I've had sponsors that got drunk and come back. I'm now sponsoring my first sponsor, who has 11 years now, and that's a special thing that I have with him. Be good to your sponsees. You might need them one day. But I met a guy in 1994 that's my sponsor today. And I'm going to make this as brief as possible, but I got to get this in my story because it's such an important part of it. I met Jerry at my home group at Willow Springs 12-Step Group. And I had been through a divorce from Janice and managed to get through that without doing anything stupid. We had a stick-built house. We had 2 cars in the driveway, 2 checkbooks. Life was good. I said, girl, you leaving on the upswing. You should have left a long time ago. But there was a lot of mental illness on her side too, and she was just going through a lot, and it was just better. We just amicably went our different ways. But it didn't hurt any less. I went through a lot of grief. It hurt terribly. I love her dearly. We still talk to this day. But it just wasn't going to work, you know. I was going back to school. My work that I'd lost that job, and I got hired 30 days into sobriety. I've been with the company now 35 years. They sent me back to school to take engineering courses, to do engineering work, and I've worked my way into an engineering role, and now I'm starting to manage engineers. Just so many things that God has done in my life as a direct result of the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the program, a home group. It's good sponsorship, but I was going through with my next wife, Samantha is my wife today, and her and I wanted to get pregnant, and we did right away because I'm 8 years older than she is, so she's never been married, but her clock's ticking, so she wanted to have a child, and I did too, and so we got busy, and we got pregnant, yay. And so we're about 3 months into it now, and we're starting to tell people because we didn't want to tell until we knew for sure. And sure enough, in the next month, she had a miscarriage, and it rocked my world. It's like pulling the rug out from under me, or getting kicked in the gut and knocking the wind out of you spiritually. And I couldn't get over it because I'm thinking, God, I'm sponsoring all these men. I'm active in my home group. I'm active in service work. I'm doing everything you asked me to do, and the best you can do is take my first child. God, what is up with that? And I was so absorbed with just selfishness and self-centeredness, and I could not get beyond it. And I'd worked with my current sponsor. I'd done everything I could to try to get beyond it, and I just could not get out from under it. And I had watched Jerry sponsor a friend of mine, Todd, through a really painful divorce. And Todd came out the other side with dignity and integrity and character. And I said, man, I need some of that. And I said, Jerry, do you know, we was over at Came to Believe group in Rocky Mount. I'd given a talk there, and I come down off the podium, one of them come to Jesus moments. And I asked Jerry in the hallway, I said, Bo, you think you could help me like you did Todd? I said, I could really use your help because I've tried everything else and it's not working. I said, if you can help Todd, you can help me. You know? And he said, yeah, Tony, I think I can do that. He said, the only time I got is 5:30. I said, well, I get off at 4:30 in the afternoon. That'll work out pretty good. He said, no, Tony, 5:30 a.m. I said, oh, my God. I live in Angier. He lives in Cary. That's a 45-minute ride. That means I can get up at 4 o'clock. I said, I'll take it. I'll take it. He said, okay. And that good man got up every morning for months. Every weekday morning, we met every morning. And he read that book out of me line for line. And we got to a prayer. It says, we asked God, we prayed it. When we got to a step, we worked it. And that transformation through step 2, that coming to believe that God didn't take my first child, that he actually saved me from having to deal with maybe something that would not have been very pleasant for me and my wife. And I never thought of it that way, that God was actually doing for me and for that child what we as humans in our humanity and our self-centeredness could not think of how to do that, you know. And I could never get to that without going through that part of the step. We took that third step prayer, and I went back through that fourth step as outlined in the big book. And I've never done anything quite like that before, and it was just wonderful. It transformed me. It changed the way that I felt, the way I thought. My whole reaction to life changed. I had another spiritual experience at 13 years of sobriety, and it just changed the whole trajectory of my recovery. I started sponsoring men the same way. I know many of you in here do the same thing, and it's exactly the way the first 100 intended it to be, was for us to use that book and follow the directions, specifically how they did it, so that they could recover, and we found we can recover the same way. And it's kind of my syllabus as I sponsor people now. And I'm so grateful that that man took time out of his busy schedule to give me that wonderful gift, that I could then give it to others and be a light to others in their path of darkness and help them to figure it out. All my sponsees do that now. And it's a wonderful thing to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous and be in the middle of AA. Last Saturday, I missed Spring into Action. I was doing a workshop for our district. I'm the alternate DCM for our district. And I was doing a workshop on, I always do correction stuff, but this I was doing a role of the GSR. And I took a whole group of new GSRs and alternate GSRs through the GSR pamphlet of Circles, Love, and Service, and the service manual, and hit the different high spots. The one thing I had to make sure was that leaflet we got at Freedom from Bondage, the leadership role. Leadership's a vital part of AA. And I understand today what leadership is and what leadership's not. And I know today that I'm just a trusted servant and I'm not a senator. And Alcoholics Anonymous and the traditions of AA has given me a place in my home group, a place in my life at work, at home with my family. Both my wife and I have both of our moms with us right now, and they're aging, and we're dealing with that. And I'm just so grateful that I go to bed at night knowing my mom's okay tonight, you know. And I haven't always had that. She's usually down east and she's alone, and I don't like that situation. And I've been asking God for direction. My daughter now, Samantha and I had a daughter in 2003. Her name is Brooke. She's 19. She just started college. She started this semester. And so now I've got her staying at home rather than going off to school. Thank God. There's a lot of Tony in there, boy. If she goes off to school, man, she's going to do like I did when I went to Green. But what I want to close with is this, is just to let you know that when you read the first full paragraph of 100, that both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what my present circumstances are. What a gift that is. What a promise. Thank you so much for letting me share tonight.